Chapter 41, in which Professor K. Boom studies Princess Kitty for research. More transfixed than ever, Professor K. Boom takes Princess Kitty inside the warehouse through the huge door. She still holds on to the encyclopedia, but was gently taken away by him. You can read this up there after I properly conduct an examination on you, he said, pointing at a small office on the mezzanine floor. I'll start in a few minutes. Does this cat have a name? Miranda asked when she and Adam approached him. Princess Kitty of KAWAII Wonderland, he said. She'll be staying here for tonight, instead of my apartment. Forget it, Miranda said. She's not supposed to be here anyway.
Yeah, especially after she pinned you,
Adam said. A major misunderstanding that was, Professor K. Boom said. And I think you should appreciate her when you get to know her better. Now, if you don't mind, I must tell her about me.
I would like to know you, Professor,
Princess Kitty said. Sure you do, he said, smiling and leading her to tables with his inventions displayed on there. Sometimes, Kitty, imagination can be a useful tool, the only thing we depend on, when it comes to becoming one of the modern era's most innovative inventors. Carl McGee got his parking meter. Frank Whittle and Hans von Ohain got their jet engine. Alex Fleming discovered penicillin. Garrett Morgan got his traffic signal. Now I think they're science fair contestants compared to me. With a few lucky charms, some tests, confidence, and lots of breakfast cereals, I want to bring forth the future with revolutionary machines that can revolutionize our way of living entirely. She looked at the contraptions on the tables.
With these?
She asked. They're still in progress, he said. So keep your hands to yourself. As you can see, I've been working on inventions for the past 5 years, but some ended up failing. On the floor next to a table, he points at an old quadricycle with a catapult on 4 wheels tied to the back. This is a newspaper catapult. This one isn't a failure because of a series of lawsuits with property damage. It's because it kept breaking down. He points at a heavy-duty backpack with turbines on the sides. Jetpack, for those who can fly like birds. It's one of the inventions that I almost got killed. He points at a contraption made out of a chair and half of a bicycle. Now, here's the creme de la creme. My automatic hair-cutting machine. Still a work in progress. That's what happened to my hair when I tested it. I have to wear a toupee for 2 months. It's very humiliating. What do you think of my inventions? Interested to see them work later? Hesitantly, she said.
Depends or not whether they actually work.
Well, his inventions have a lot in common, Miranda said, glaring at her uncle. They end up failing. Again and again and again. Clearly, you have no confidence in me, Miranda, he stated. I will always make sure there are no bugs in them. I wouldn't want one of them backfiring during the bicentennial the day after tomorrow. Princess Kitty is now deeply concerned with the professor's misfortune. Her pupils dilated and said,
I see it.
See what? He asked.
I fear that your misfortunes from your inventions may be the result of abnormal negative energy.
Abnormal? My inventions? Why, that's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. But she snapped firmly.
If you think that's the most absurd thing you've ever heard, then you might have bad luck. Negative energy can be the cause of it. Probably from childhood.
What does that mean, Kitty? He asked. Do you honestly think I'm cursed or something?
Especially if I use Ninchi on you? One of the abilities I've had?
What's that?
I analyze your brain. I can see that you possess negative energy, especially while you work on your machines.
Oh, really? Do you have any remedies?
Always depend on crystals you can use to absorb the negative energy, whether it's hematite or black tourmaline. For anxiety, you use either blue lace agate or amethyst. For depression, you use either lepidolite or tiger's eye.
I don't need magic rocks to improve my inventions. That is why I'm taking precautions in case they backfire. If they don't work, I'll modify them until they work properly. Well, good luck, Professor, Miranda snapped. It's not like you're going to need it. You always fail. Miranda Louise Stearns, he sneered. We are done discussing about my inventions, and your concerns do not interest me. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must get ready to examine our guest. What are you going to do with that cat? I haven't encountered a girl with cat ears before. Hell, I never even studied one for research before. We'll make her feel right at home, since she has nowhere else to stay. She crossed her arms. I hope it doesn't end well. I don't trust that cat.
You can trust me, Miranda,
Princess Kitty said.
Maybe you've heard of me doing great things to people in your city.
Really? He asked. Well, we can trust you for the rest of your visit. Won't we? Well, I don't. But feel free to pity over me, Miranda snapped. Bad enough I almost got killed, but I happen to still be surrounded by a bunch of addlepates, as in 2 bumbling idiots. She storms off.
Has your niece ever said bad words before?
Princess Kitty asked. There was this one time with the breakfast machine, but I wouldn't tell you what she said, because I wish to make your visit wholesome, he said. Anyway, why don't we get started? He leads her to his laboratory underneath the mezzanine. There was a set of beakers on the counter, a gurney, and a scale. When he attempted to make his wart remover, he makes sure that he does it away from his lab. After the explosion, the laboratory was shaken, but still operational. She sat on the gurney while he brings forth a black underwood typewriter and placed it onto a desk. Good, he said. Now we can get ready.
You invent that?
She asked, pointing at the typewriter. It's been around for 60 years. People still use it today. Now, would you mind laying down onto the gurney? She did just that, and he walked over and shackled her hands. It frightened her a little. No need to worry, he said. Just a safety precaution in case you have some sort of adverse reaction. Looking at her legs, which were unshackled, he said, If you wouldn't mind, I'll just take off your boots. Is that all right with you? She slowly nodded. He went over and took off her boots. Then he went pale. He was actually staring at her paws, which were large and covered in soft white fur, and they had light pink pads on the soles. Looking up, he can notice the fur that goes up to her legs. Sweet heavens above, he exclaimed. Now we're getting somewhere. He went to his desk and sat behind it. He begins typing. Catgirl subject turns out to be a mythical apparition, a hybrid with the head, hands, and torso of a human, and the ears, tail, eyes, nose, mouth, whiskers, legs, and feet of an actual cat. She wiggled her toes.
I can tell that you're excited about me at your place so far, especially if it's research, whatever that is.
Well, that's just the beginning, he said, and went over to the gurney. Now for the skirt. He unfastened the button and shimmied the skirt down, slowly uncovering her hips, that were disproportionately wider than the upper part of her body. That made him very nervous, because of the proportions of it. but he went on, shackling her legs. "All right, let's get started," he said.
What are you planning to do?
She asked. "I want to get a basic look at your anatomy, then study some of the more basic physiological functions if I can." She watches as he snapped on a pair of rubber gloves and moved in. "If at any time you feel any discomfort or want me to stop, please tell me." In her current condition, discomfort was somewhat of an understatement. Still, some part of her reasoned that if she just let him get this over with, then she could spend her time in the mezzanine office reading the encyclopedia he gave to her. If he wants to know her better, so be it. She inhaled sharply as his gloved hands fell onto her leotard, slightly brushing against her ribs. She closed her eyes and let out some low purrs as his hands made their way up her sides, occasionally putting pressure along certain areas. He examined her arms and hands as well. He stopped and goes back to his underwood, typing. Cat-girl hybrid has a mostly normal human bone structure, apart from certain small deformities. It's almost as if the bones were stretched in some places. The anatomy of the upper chest is surprisingly similar. He gets up and grabbed her by the cheeks and looked deeply at her face. He turned her head, studying it carefully. The close proximity made her cheeks flush as her breathing sped up. She knew he wasn't going to hurt her, but she had a strong feeling in her stomach that still made her immensely nervous. He opened her mouth and inspected her tongue behind her fangs. Excessive warmth, a much faster breathing rate than most humans, 30 teeth in total, 14 in the lower jaw, 16 in the upper, 4 canines, and 4 molars. He closed her mouth and goes back to his underwood, typing his notes down. He grabbed a stethoscope off the desk before going back to the gurney, placing the cold metal against her chest. Highly abnormal heart rate, possibly about 140 to 220 beats per minute, he said to himself as he types this. "I'm going to study the anatomy of your lower body now," he said. He looked down at her legs. His hands drifted down to run his fingers along her thick thighs. Little butterflies flew around in her chest as the simple petting of her leg sent sensations up her spine. Involuntarily, she could feel her eyes close and a soft purr escape from her lips. "You seem to like this, don't you?" he asked as he continued to pet her. She did indeed like it. It was almost as if she were an actual cat, adoring all the attention she got. The soothing petting from him just felt so relaxing. And the minute she felt his fingers trace along her ears, her willingness to be careful slipped out the window. However, she cautioned herself, trying not to let him pull her by the ears. It did little to help when he gently started massaging her large, furry white paws with his gloved hands.
Professor, is this necessary?
She responded while getting her feet massaged.
Is this part of the research?
How could I help myself? He asked. I think your paws are furry and soft to touch. They're not sensitive, are they?
I've been wearing my boots for a long time. I don't feel my paws being sensitive.
Now, we'll see if they tend to have involuntary twitching movements, he smiled. By using his index finger, he was able to tickle the soles of her feet by rubbing his finger against them lightly, which then causes her to laugh and giggle out loud. In no time she succumbed, squealing with laughter. She closed her eyes and grimaced as she thrust her hips upward. This caused his pants to come down by itself. Looking down and blushing, he stopped tickling her and pulled them back up, muttering. Then he types on his underwood. Cat-girl hybrid tend to have involuntary twitching movements upon tickling. He heads back to her, carrying a needle with the plunger down. Her eyes went wide as she stared at the needle. "Now," he said, "I need you to relax, so I can get a blood sample from you." She turned her head away and gagged. He wiped her arm with a cotton ball covered in alcohol, before sticking the needle in. "In the needle goes, and out the blood comes," he said. He pulls up the plunger. Out came the blood, but it had a rich blue color. That's when he made another remarkable discovery. He carefully pulls back the needle and walks towards the microscope. Looking through it, he can see quivering blood cells. They were actually in a royal blue color. He types on his underwood. Cat-girl hybrid has blood cells that are abnormally blue instead of red. He heads back to her. "I think it's now time to pull you by the ears to see if they're real."
Don't do that!
She suddenly shouted angrily. "And why not?" he asked.
This hurts more than being pulled by the tail!
Being pulled by the ears hurts more than being pulled by the tail? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. It should be the other way around, because it's like this. A cat's tail is made of bones, muscles, and several nerve endings that can be very sensitive.
I don't care!
She screamed, shaking her body around, while she was still shackled.
You will not pull me by the ears!
"I want to pull you by the ears," he said.
I'm warning you!
"I want to pull you by the ears."
You better stop telling me that!
"I want to pull you by the ears."
Those who pull a cat by the ears will sure regret it!
But alas, he pulled her by the ears. Suddenly he froze and let go of her ears. His eyes sparkled. Thrusting her body to the left, the typewriter keys began clacking, as if someone invisible touched them. Miranda stormed towards the lab. "What's going on now?" she demanded. "Do you want me to untie you?"
No,
Princess Kitty said.
I think there's something wrong with the professor, and I need your help.
"Oh, it's help you want," Miranda sneered. Then she punched her uncle in the face, knocking him back. He held his head, and then his nose. He saw blood on his hand. "Are you crazy?" he demanded. "You dare hurt your own uncle?" "Serves you right," she glared. "What are you talking about? If it's about the inventions..."
Well, it's about time you learn to take responsibility for your actions,
Princess Kitty said. "But I don't even know what happened," he said.
Then why don't you look at your typewriter?
He heads over to the desk and looks at the paper. Then his eyes bore down at what the Underwood has typed while he was in a trance. Cat-girl hybrid has some kind of defense mechanism on ears. If pulled, it results in the puller becoming induced into trance, unless getting struck or just waited out for 30 minutes, more or less. Unlike ordinary cats, cat-girl hybrid feels no pain if pulled by a tail. "I didn't type this down," he cried.
Neither did I.
She said, glaring.
I'm still shackled.
"Is that what happened when I pull you by the ears? By getting me into a trance?"
Just be glad Miranda got you out of it. Hopefully it won't happen again.
"Oh, all right. I guess I had it coming." She lurched her body again. The shackles came off her hands and her legs.
Do you want me to help you with your face?
She asked. "Can you do that?" he asked. She gets out of the gurney and pulls out her scepter from behind.
You get this one for free,
she said.
But know this, there's no such thing as an easy fix.
Then the end of the scepter glows. "Get what for free?" he asked. Then he stopped when he looked at his hand. He sees no blood on it. Then he touched his face. He doesn't feel something wet. What did you do to me, Kitty? He asked. Get what for free?
I wish I had a complaint box with me, she said. Is that all for your research?
Not yet. I want to measure your height and your weight. He picks up a tape measure. All right, he instructed. Back against the pillars. She placed her back against one of the pillars. He extends the tape starting down at her feet and going up to the top of her head. Wait here, he said, and begins typing. Cat-girl hybrid measures in at 5 feet 6 inches or 167 centimeters in height. An extra inch if you count her ears. He points at the scale. Now we shall measure how much you weigh. Would you please step on the scale? She did just that. But when he looked down, his eyes went wide. He was shocked that the scale read 0.0. How is that possible? He asked.
What is it?
She asked.
A problem already?
Maybe it's broken. Princess, why don't I weigh myself, just to make sure it's functional? He weighed himself. The scale read 192.8. He frowned and muttered to himself. It works for anyone else, but not for her. I really need to get out more. He turned to her and said, I got an idea. Why don't you step onto the scale, then I'll step off. It's worth a try. She stepped onto the scale. It still read 192.8. Okay, he said. On the count of 3, I'll jump off the scale. Hopefully, that scale will work this time. There's no way you can actually weigh 0 pounds. Are you ready?
Ready then.
He began to count. 1, 2, 3! He immediately sprang out of the scale and onto his feet. He looks down, and to his shock, it read 0.0. He looked up at her. I don't know if I should say this, but you're weightless, he said. It's impossible for a person to be weightless on Earth. You're so weightless, you're bound to float off into space. Unless if you're either anorexic or full of helium. An average cat weighs at 8 to 10 pounds. Also, an average teenage girl, based on your height, weighs 101 pounds. You, miss, are neither an ordinary cat nor an average teenage girl. He picked her up with ease. I can even carry you.
Is that all?
She demanded. He puts her down and said, No, just one more thing. He heads back to his underwood and typed, Cat-girl hybrid weighs in at 0 pounds. Now, I shall finish our examination with your measurements, he said. Will you be comfortable with me taking them? It won't hurt. Just hold this end here, and I'll begin with your bust size. Adam cuts in.
Hope you're not getting any bright ideas.
Out! Professor K-Boom shouted. Out! Out! Or I'll turn you into a toaster oven! Adam slowly walks off, clearly because of him being made of metal. All right, let's start, Professor K-Boom said. She pressed her thumb against the tip of the measuring tape, and he wrapped the tape around the chest, pressing firmly against it. Good, he said. Now for the waist. He drew the tape around her waist. Interesting, very slim, he said. Now, onto the hips. That's when he felt his heart rate ramp up. Not a while ago, he remembered the proportions of her lower assets, and he's not looking forward of what had to be done.
Something wrong?
She asked. Just fine, he said sheepishly. Let's finish up. He gave the end of the tape to her, who held it against her hip, while he started around her posterior. By the time 2 ends of tape met, his eyes went wide in shock, and his skin went pale. Probably he suffered a nosebleed. Wait right there, he said. and heads back to the Underwood, typing down her measurements. Bust size is 32 inches. Waist size is 24 inches. Hip size is 43 inches. Then he additionally types, cat-girl hybrid happens to be heavy from the waist downwards. I think her weight of 0 pounds is starting to mock me.
Anything wrong, Professor?
She asked. He gets up. Kitty, have you been overeating for the past few weeks? He asked.
Not that I recall.
I deal as I may. I think you're putting on weight, especially in the lower assets.
Are you calling me fat?
She scolded. Her tail puffs up. I didn't say that on purpose, he said. It's just that your hips happen to be a bit wider. The point is that you may have childbearing hips, which is considered very attractive to some. Only in an era when a woman was expected to give birth to a few kids. It's all genetics. I think you might inherit them from your mother.
Really?
What I'm saying is that your body accumulates fat in a pear shape. Women with a pear shape store fat on the posterior and hips. It's all genetics. You understand what I'm saying to you? She observed her body below her waist herself, observing and feeling her hips in amazement. They had definitely become slightly wider than her shoulders, especially her thick thighs. It didn't take long for her to speak to him.
Know what I think?
Yeah? He asked.
I still can't believe you called me fat!
She frowned.
How dare you insult a cat-girl princess!
Just forget it! That's all the physical examinations I need. You can put your skirt and your boots back on and go up to the office and read your book. But first, what is your purpose in coming here?
I'm currently on an expedition to make new friends out of grown-ups. Are you going to be my friends?
We will be your friends, though I won't be too sure of Miranda. We hope to get more information from you soon. Twilight was approaching as the day shift left the factories of Withermire. Dressed in their overalls, they strolled out of the area and out onto the streets, turning towards their home or a nearby bus station. Meanwhile, in the warehouse, regarding her newfound knowledge about cats, Princess Kitty finds them fascinating when she spends all day reading the encyclopedia. Though she felt unease about the subject of the reproductive system of both sexes, as well as some other things like courtship and an estrus cycle. Professor K. Boom, Adam, and Miranda decide to have dinner with their new guest. Seeing that Princess Kitty is hungry and hasn't eaten for days, Professor K. Boom figured out what cat-girl hybrids eat. When he gave her a plate full of meat and fish, she was cross and turns her head. Just a little taste? He asked. She turned her head again. He looked surprised when she gives him that attitude. He tried again. Come on, Your Highness. It's good for you. Don't you want to get sick and die from malnutrition? She turned her head again. He's running out of patience. Don't give me that attitude. I've just got back from the grocery store. I spared little expense. Now please eat this food. Finally, in a rage, she picks up the plate and hurls it towards a wall, shattering on impact. He placed a hand on her, but she growled and hissed at him, baring her fangs, causing him to recoil in fear. Sweating profusely, he visibly gives up. I just don't get it, he groaned. I know that since she's a cat hybrid, I did expect her to eat the same foods as a regular one does. Might as well write this down. He pulls out his notepad and writes the additional information. Cat-girl hybrid does not crave foods a regular cat does. But what? He underlined the word what 3 times for emphasis. Then, turning at where his guest sat, he finds that she was gone. Looking around, Adam snarked.
Maybe she's gone off to our home planet and start an intergalactic war with us. It'll be like War of the Worlds, except with cat people.
Suddenly, they hear a noise from the kitchen. They decide to head inside to investigate. Miranda screamed at the sight of Princess Kitty raiding the icebox, wolfing down some chocolate truffles in a large tin box. "That was my experiment!" Miranda screamed. "An experiment on whether eating one chocolate truffle a day can improve weight loss without exercise. Now I have to start over!" "Never mind the experiment," Professor K-Boom cried. "This is a discovery! I'll write this down. I write this underneath the latest information. Cat-girl hybrid turns out to crave on anything that is high on sugar, including chocolates, which is toxic to regular cats. I fear that cat-girl hybrid is not like any regular one." "Perfect! That's all I need for now."
More!
Princess Kitty screamed. "As you wish, Highness," he laughed. "Coming, Miranda? We're off to Good Cooking Pan Bakery."
But Good Cooking Pan Bakery is closed now,
Adam said. "We're off to Vanille Fish Queso Bakery," Professor K-Boom said. "It's open till 9. We better hurry." "There goes my appetite," Miranda groaned. "A diet bag's worst nightmare." With some of the money, Professor K-Boom returned with a collection of sweets that are large enough for a buffet. There were cakes, pies, cupcakes, pastries, fritters, donuts, and all kinds of sweets and desserts. "You do realize you spared no expense with so much junk," Miranda groaned. "No big deal. I'll make enough money if I showcase one of my inventions at the fairground," he defended. "Just because they're revolutionary doesn't mean they're not going to fail. Again!" Princess Kitty's mouth waters at the sight of so much sweets, and her eyes sparkle. "Well?" he asked. "Is the Royal Highness pleased?"
Ich habe keine Ahnung, dass du wirklich so viel Desserts gegeben hast,
she chirped. "Would you please speak English like the rest of us?" Miranda snapped.
Machen Sie sich keine Sorgen darüber, welche Sprache ich spreche.
Princess Kitty said to Miranda.
Manchmal, wenn ich aufgeregt genug bin, ist es das, was ich tue.
I had to ask, didn't I?
Und damit beginnt das königliche Bankett. Herr Professor,
Princess Kitty said. Almost immediately, she began to feast while he watches, delighted. But Miranda was disgusted, making her vow to never eat sweets again. At least her idiot uncle has some new information for his research on her, a friend he recently has made. He was writing in his notepad. Upon glance, I would assume that the excessive amounts of sweets Catgirl Hybrid consume would make her morbidly obese. But either she had an excessive metabolism or something else. She hadn't gained any weight, but I would think that upon measuring her hip size, I assume all fat gets transported to thighs. The very thought of how big her thighs are getting gives him a nosebleed, as he brushed off any uneasy thoughts that came in contact with. If it pleases you, Your Highness, I would like you to accept these royal gifts, he said.
What have you got for me?
She asked. He got out a bag. I just commit some highway robbery on the way. Spare no expense. He pulls out a feather wand and shows it to her. A lovely teaser for your hands to swipe it. He then pulls out a mechanical mouse and shows it to her. A toy for you to chase around the shed or any house. He then pulls out a brush and shows it to her. A brush to groom with. If you want to sharpen your claws, go nuts on the couches. I won't mind. He then pulls out a weird green ball.
What is it?
She asked. This is Nepetacataria, or catnip, he smiled. It's an herb that contains a chemical called nipidolactone. It affects some cats the way chocolate affects some people. It causes a delicious ecstasy that makes them want more. Just a nip can send them rolling, rubbing and battling their paws at imaginary butterflies. he gives her the catnip ball, and she sniffed it deeply. Her pupils dilate and just spun her head around, smiling a very naive-looking smile. "Aren't you pleased?" he asked. She moaned. Her eyes rolled up, her mouth open, her tongue hanging out.
"I'm pleased with this gift, all right."
"Well, good, because I spared no expense on purchasing other essentials." She sniffed the catnip ball again and said,
"Although I do feel woozy."
"Well, I know how you feel," he said. "It's getting late after all. Why don't—" There was a crash, and she fell to the floor, sprawling before becoming still. "There's no way catnip can do that, unless it's ingested," he said, as he knelt down and touched her forehead. "When ordinary cats smelled it, it acts as a stimulant. I have no idea it works the opposite."
Aren't you gonna wake her up?
Adam asked. "It's best not to," Professor K-Boom said. "I'm certain that she'll stay another day. We've got a big day working tomorrow. Come now, help me with her. We'll get her to a bunk." In the mayor's mansion, somewhere in Mulberry Street, Mayor Donovan wakes up and tears a page off his daily wall calendar, reading today's date, Saturday, June 8th. Looking at the date, he can't help but grin to himself. Not only because there's Sunday services tomorrow, that wasn't probably important. It's because tomorrow is the big day, the bicentennial celebration at Kedono Fairground down by the beach. Dressed in his burgundy robe, he heads downstairs and picks up today's mail that's been sent through the mail slot before heading to the kitchen. With a mug of coffee by his side, he sat at the table looking through the mail. He lifted his mug and took a drink. Then he stopped with his eyes gazing at the envelope. It has a pink paw print on it. There was a postage stamp with a picture of a cat. The address read, Fritz Roger Donovan, Mayor of Kedono, 635 Mulberry Street, Kedono. Opening up the envelope, he pulls a folded note out of it. Once he unfolds it, then he can feel his heart seized up and his hand trembling. It turns out that the message he got was from the one person who was an expert in folklore, Miss Charlotte Simone Lenoir. Hesitant, he began reading what she had wrote to him. Dear Mayor Donovan, as you are already aware, like everybody else, tomorrow is the summer bicentennial celebration. However, it's not the reason why I'm writing to you. Right now, I'm giving you one last chance to welcome this cat girl to your city. For days now, I represent the cat girl in this matter, along with both Furukawa Ryotaro and former councilperson Takahara Satoru. This girl deserves to be welcomed like someone new and novel, and we do not appreciate you refusing to do so. If you refuse to do so by tomorrow, I'll see to it that you will regret every second. You may think that nothing terrible is going to happen to your bicentennial celebration, but as an expert in folklore, I will not be hesitant to prove you wrong if you continue to refuse to welcome the girl. And if you think this is considered an ultimatum, you are free to do so, for I will say this. You're not going to get a moment's rest unless you do what I tell you for the sake of that girl, and that goes to the rest of your city. Signed, Charlotte Simone Lenoir. In a rage, he crumples up the letter and heads back upstairs. When he barged into the bedroom, he can hear his wife stirring and said, Fritz, what? Go back to sleep, Nora, he said. I have to get ready to leave for the fairground in a few minutes. Okay, hurry back, Fritz, Nora, the mayor's wife, muttered before turning her head. Oh, how very sorry he's going to be. Because tomorrow, upon crumpling up Miss Lenoir's letter, his decision of not welcoming the princess will ultimately seal the fate of the coming bicentennial. For the storm is coming. Princess Kitty woke up from a catnip-induced sleep with the voice of Brock Kincaid on the radio.
I don't know about you, but this summer's going to be warm, isn't it?
He said.
Temperatures are going to be up in the mid-60s just next week. So, if you've been planning to have fun at the fairground tomorrow morning, why not have fun while you're listening to the finest singles? You're listening to the Breakfast Hour with Brock Kincaid.
While music begins to play, she could not understand why her mind and body felt so sluggish. She flung the covers off and stretched herself as Miranda came into the room. I want you out of here, she said. Find another place to stay. Princess Kitty said.
I know. That's what I was going to do. It's my final day.
She placed her hand on her forehead as she stands up.
I don't know what came over me last night. It was like fireworks going off, one after the other.
You will leave this industrial shed. And don't take the gifts my uncle brought with you, especially the catnip. Then she became soft. I'm sorry if I sound harsh.
I don't think you sound harsh at all. I think you're pretty nice despite being focused on work. Are you going to the fairground tomorrow morning?
I had to. Professor's absolutely mad about lighter-than-air travel, like that one-person glider with folding wings he's been inventing last summer. He's the adventuresome type. He'd be spoiled if he doesn't.
I'm sure he would.
If he knows what's good, he should also ditch that stupid fetish of his, Miranda sneered. Very immature for a grown-up. Princess Kitty heads out of the warehouse, just in time to see the flatbed came to a stop. Professor K. Boom came barging out. Where are you going? He asked.
I have to leave,
she said. What? He asked, shocked. But I need to know you more. There's so many questions I want.
It's the final day of my expedition. I can't stay here. I must find another friend.
Who said? He demanded, then realized. Never mind that. When I get through to her...
No,
she said.
There will be another time, Professor. I'm sorry.
Before he can say anything, she raised up her scepter and encased her in a bubble. He can only watch as the bubble hovers away from Withermire. Right now, he has someone to deal with. Miranda Louise Stearns! He roared. You come here right now and be quick about it! Miranda burst through the office door upstairs, glaring down at him from the balcony. Well, I hope you're proud of yourself, sending her away just when I was about to get more information from her, he bellowed at his niece. She's not supposed to be here anyway, she said. You're just too stupid to not know that. That made him so angry that his face turned red and tore bits off his hair. You have to understand that we're sitting in the middle of the most important discovery of the 20th century here since Einstein discovers E equals MC squared, he ranted. And you think everyone wants in on it, she snapped. It's no wonder your IQ is dropping lower by the second. You just can't stop with this stupid, pointless catgirl fetish. She heads back inside the mezzanine office, while he chases her up the stairway. It's not a fetish! And it wasn't pointless either, he said. I'm doing important work, like bacon and eggs, ketchup and mustard, beans and wieners, bees and honey, butter and margarine, chips and salsa, tea and cakes, wine and roses, beer and pizza, death and taxes, bread and circuses! They approached the mezzanine and down the stairs. I don't know about you, but it's starting to annoy me, she said. There's so many questions I want to ask her, he said. Does she have a family? Does her kind use advanced technology to emulate the human form? Is her kingdom located in a planet close to our solar system? If she only eats sweets and not regular foods like fruits, vegetables, meat, and fish, How does she happen to feel healthy without the proper nutrition? How did she learn our language? Is she a carbon-based life form? Or something else like phosphorus? Nitrogen? Is it silicon? What school did she attend? How old is she? Why does she weigh 0.0? How does she possess powers? Genetics? Why is her blood blue instead of red? If her blood is blue, how does she get oxygen? Is it actually hemocyanin? I'm really fed up with you! I don't care what she said. We're going to find her. Imagine how people who are superstitious on this planet would react if they found out what she really is. I'm certain they do not want to hear it, do they? No wonder, young lady. You had to believe in what is real and nothing else. Just like that mayor. Well, I'm against him. And the only problem is that I didn't tell her that before she left because of you. Adam approaches the two.
Feeling down in the doldrums recently? The next Edison whose friend is a pussy?
Such very bad timing, Adam, Professor K-Boom said.
We haven't seen the last of her. Maybe she'll be at the fairground too.
Then Professor K-Boom clapped his hands together as a thought entered his brain. You're right! He exclaimed. She would, wouldn't she?
Oh, that depends,
Adam said.
And secondly, we don't know which invention we can showcase tomorrow morning.
We'll be showcasing the hair cutting machine. But don't worry, just because it's revolutionary doesn't mean it's not going to fail again. In the meantime, while we tinker with the machine, why don't we discuss more and more about this fellow who made friends out of grown-ups, including us. You really don't know when to stop talking about that girl, do you? Miranda glared. That's the idea, Professor K-Boom sneered ruefully. As long as that girl... She slams her knee at his crotch, and he's down like an oak. Next time you talk back to me, I'm gonna shove that catnip ball down your throat so you can choke on it, she said with the same attitude. He groaned. You ignorant niece! Ignorant? I'm being ignorant? Do you really want me to waste my time believing in fairy tales that aren't real? You ignorant niece! The one thing I hate, other than my inventions failing, is that everyone in the city is in a mindless state of ignorance when there's so much mystery in this world. And one day, people have no other option but to depend on something like that girl into their lives. Well, if you decide to get out of living in a dream world and believe in something that's real like everybody else, don't even hesitate to give me an answer. She storms out of the room. He doesn't want to be disrespected like that.
You're really not gonna listen to her, are you?
Adam asked. Professor K-Boom groaned. Most definitely. Get me a bag of ice and meet me up at the office. He carefully went up the stairs and into the mezzanine office, where he turns on a light and pulls out the typed notes from the drawer of his desk and placed them next to the underwood. Adam came up with a bag of ice. Professor K-Boom took it and carefully pressed it against his crotch. He winced when he felt the cold before moving on. Now then, given most of the typed observations I've got of this creature yesterday, it's amazing, he said.
Why, she's too good to be true,
Adam said. Now to type this report with the information I had, plus a few suggestions of my own. Specimen identified as a cat/human hybrid, female, possibly Caucasian, age unspecified. Now, given these structural characteristics, I'm guessing she's 65% cat and 35% human. So that means she would be biologically classified into the genus Felis under the family Felidae, scientifically named either Felis sapiens, a combination of Homo sapiens and Felis catus, or Felis sapiens catus. Then Professor K-Boom stopped and leaned back. I think I'm starting to sound like Linnaeus for a minute.
Well, they have to see something new.
Adam shrugged.
You discover it. You let her stay in your warehouse for tonight.
Of course I have. Against my niece's will. I say too bad about her, and too bad about that mayor of ours.
And do you think you're positive enough?
You bet your bolts, Adam, when it comes to these things. In times such as these, The world still had so much mystery to it. You may never know what awaits you. Something in a way that defied everything we thought we knew about the natural sciences.
Funny, because a long time ago, no such thing has happened here.
Yet I don't get the feeling why everyone should continue to live in a state of denial for as long as they see fit, Professor K-Boom stated. 50 years ago, 100, 200, no astonishing thing has happened in this city. From cradle to grave, whether it's in the eyes of children, teenagers, grown-ups, animals, cellular organisms, no astonishing thing ever happened in this city. No astonishing thing happened before I was even born. That's because we know for a fact that some unusual things are uncommon in our daily lives. Back then, people heard of stories about beanstalks and ogres and golden geese, witches in houses made of candy to lure little children, wolves disguised as grandmothers, knights in shining armors, and princesses locked in castles that were guarded by fire-breathing dragons. Parents tell these stories to their children after they tuck them into bed every night. Those things have existed in either on paper or in our imagination. But what if such things do exist in the real world, like the cat girl we've met? As we talk, we've already heard of walking cats and flying clothes and terrible birds. People were left stunned and baffled because nobody has ever seen these things recently after that hybrid came along to this world. That tells you this one important question I think everyone is asking by now. Do they even think the city is going to stay ordinary, even when there's a cat/human hybrid wandering these streets? You know, when I first saw her here, I could barely believe such a creature existed. It's like that old saying, truth is stranger than fiction. But now, I would think it's the other way around. That fiction is stranger than truth. When she first came here so suddenly to take center stage in the world's imagination, it seemed as though something out of a fairy tale had come to life. Think of the possibilities that awaits those people in the city if they get to know her more when I know the complete profile of this girl. What we are seeing here, you and I, is a new way to look at reality, starting with that creature from some other world. The start of seeing unusual things affecting our daily lives. A new era into the history of the world that is destined to be written in ink and immortalized in stone. People shall continue to live in a mindless state of denial for as long as they want. I even refuse to reconsider them. But one day, if such things are too much for them, they have no rational option but to accept. That's how things are going to be from now on.
Oh, how I'm bound to feel bad for those people,
Adam said.
They should have you locked up, especially for the inventions that backfired.
Professor K-Boom didn't reply back. He would spend the next hour reviewing his typed notes for his report, in the hope of meeting her again at the time of the bicentennial.